session, Data and Technology, Capstone 1. I believe data is going to be the key to transportation moving forward, and we're going to hear more about that from three of our experts in that area this morning. So I'm going to start off. Our first speaker is going to be one of our virtual speakers, Dr. Gijo Matthew. He's from Purdue University. He's a transportation research engineer at the Joint Transportation Research Program, the JTRP. He specializes in developing system performance measures that assist agencies and policymakers in undertaking decisions that help improve the organizational objectives. Dr. Matthew received his PhD from Purdue in 2018, his master's in civil from Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, in 2014. His research interests include connected vehicles, shared mobility, intelligent transportation systems, and traffic operations. He's also a licensed amateur radio operator and FAA Part 107 small UAS pilot. What a great mix of interest and skills there, Dr. Matthew. I'd like to ask Dr. Matthew, go ahead and start your presentation.
Thank you, Joe. I hope you can see my screen and hear me well. All right. I first want to thank Georgia IT for this opportunity, and with that I'm going to start. The main message that I want to start with is that our vehicles know more about our infrastructure than we do. And we're in a period where vehicles collecting a ton of data, but being knowing where the potholes are, where the poorly lane markings are, where we have geometric lane changes or construction issues. There's a lot of data that's being collected by the vehicles, and if we can tap into some of those information to identify some of the problems that we have, there's a lot of opportunity that's lying ahead. So first I want to thank and acknowledge everybody who's contributed to this research and this presentation. It's been a collective team effort. So thank you to everybody, the graduate students, faculty, and then the staff as well. So the main issue or the area that I want to discuss today is the importance of identifying back of queue crashes on interstates and how we can mitigate them using connected vehicle data. So I'm going to go back 2 years back to a crash that happened on I-65, that's north of Indianapolis. This was a multi-vehicle pileup where we had a primary crash, and then queues started building up, and then we had a crash to the rear end of the back of the queue that resulted in a fatality. So when you think of it, when you have free flow conditions on the interstate, and then suddenly you have a congested part, all it takes is a moment of inattentiveness to result in this crash. And studies have found that during congested periods, crash rates actually go up by a factor of 24 compared to uncongested periods. And results from some of the previous years have seen that most of the crashes that happen there, nearly half of them are rear end or back of queue. And recently we looked at a study where we looked at heartbreaking events, or these are like surrogates of crashes or near misses, and we compared them to the crashes. We found there's a strong correlation between the heartbreaking events and then the crashes. And we also looked at work zones in Indiana, and we looked at all the crashes inside those work zones and the heartbreaking events inside those work zones. And what we found is that there is 147 heartbreakings for every one crash per mile. So if we can reduce these heartbreakings or these near misses, we can definitely bring down these crashes. So we've identified like the problem, and then I also want to talk about what's that big picture, how can we solve them, or how can we mitigate this? And one way that we can use the modern technology that's available to us now is to provide advanced alerts or warnings to motorists to warn them of like dangerous slowdowns ahead. And we can do this nowadays, or right now, using Google Maps or Apple Maps or Waze, and we can push these notifications to them. And that's how I'll be talking like how we can use connected vehicle data to identify where these dangerous slowdowns and how we can push them. And for those people who don't have these Google Maps or not using them, what Indiana is currently doing and is aggressively pushing is that having these trucks that we call as the queue trucks, that they are placed near the queues and they move backwards with the queue, and they warn the motorist of these dangerous slowdown ahead. And all these queue trucks are also equipped with sensors that can actually push their location details to Waze in real time, and thereby it's a combination of like the visual presence on the road and then these digital alerts that we can actually use to kind of mitigate these situations. And the main idea here is to protect the queue. And 2019, what we found is like 45% of all the crashes were mostly rear-end crashes. So what can we do to aggressively to protect this queue and mitigate this issue and reduce these crashes? So that's where I'll come in and talk about how we can use connected vehicle data. So what I'm going to talk about is two main data sources that we are getting recently. So the one is the movement data. It's a continuous data trail of the vehicle's trajectory, 3-second pings with geopositional data like the latitude, longitude, timestamps, completely anonymized with the speeds and the headings. And then the second one is something called the event data, and these are discrete events like your heart braking or height acceleration or seat belts. And then we're also getting these with the geopositional data and the timestamps, speed, and heading, and all of them anonymized to completely anonymized. And to give you a feel of what this looks like, 1 month, August 2020, for nearly points, and that's big data that we're talking about. And if you look at Indiana, that's around nearly 11 billion data points in a month. Georgia, around 13 billion, and California and Texas, close to 30 and 50 billion data points. And similarly for the event data, nearly 103 million, a bit more low on the lower side because these are discrete events that's been captured. And when I talk about heart braking, it's actually defined by the OEM as close to around 2.67 meters per second square. That's the heart braking that we are seeing. And just to give you like what 1 hour of this data looks like, this is California. So around, and the noon time when you go for lunch and come back, around 52 million points, close to 10 GB of data. And you can see almost all the road networks that light up. Texas, and even Georgia too. You can see those urban areas, Atlanta and all of those major cities. You can see those dense clusters. And then this is 1 month of heart braking data in Indiana, and you can see like the reach and the penetration of this data set. It almost gets to all the nook and corners. So what I'm going to do now is kind of talk about this data analytics, like one of the applications that we have built in-house, where we have used a fusion of this connected vehicle data with crash data from the state repositories, and then traffic camera images from the ITS infrastructure that the state has put in place, and a fusion of all this with an application to identify some of these hotspots and then areas where we have this road closures and crashes happening. So what we've developed is what we call the traffic impact heat map. So this is a dashboard that we've developed in-house. So to start with, there are certain user inputs that we can put in, the date ranges. We can pick the route that we want to look at, and then the mile markers or the mile posts between which we want to look at the data. And then what this spits out is basically a heat map based on the traffic speeds. And then we can also bring in camera images from the ITS infrastructure in real time. So the output is something like this. And so in the on your y-axis, actually, you have the mile markers or the mile posts. And on your x-axis, you have the time of the day. So starting from hour 0 to hour 24. And then these are separated by the direction. So I-70 in the eastbound direction and I-70 in the westbound direction. And these are color-coded by the speeds. Green is good, so anything about 55 and 65 miles per hour, green is good. And red and purple are really, that's when you have dangerous slowdowns happening on your interstate. And you see these blank spots, these are when we're getting no data. That means the interstate is shut down and then there's no vehicles going through the speed. And so this is an example of the heat map. And then what we can do is that add the hard braking points on top of this, overlay them, and then you can see that I'm going to go back and forth around these congested periods, where you have this uncongested, the boundary condition between the uncongested regime and the congested regime. You can see all those cluster of hard braking points happening. And these are our hotspots, and these are the areas like we want to provide this advanced notifications and warnings to the motorist. And then we can also bring in crash data. Crash data is actually, unfortunately, not real time, so we have to wait for these to come into the state repository. But we can overlay them, and then we can see like was there slowdown due to a crash, or was it due to a construction or certain other incidents. And we can also bring in camera images in real time from the state DOT that's up there. So what I'm going to do now is going to go to a particular event that occurred on the I-70 between mile markers 40 and 60 last year, and we're going to compare two of these. One is the segment data heat map based from the segment data that we've been all using for the past decade, and on the right side is the trajectory heat map with the new data source that I was talking about earlier. So you can see, so there was a primary crash here, and then there was a secondary crash in the westbound direction that resulted in a congestion and slowdowns. And then what we can see is that the left side, more or less similar, very similar. Only in the early mornings we see a gap over here, and that's mainly because this data is primarily coming from passenger vehicles. So over time, this should also fill up when they have more vehicles and maybe more truck data and commercial vehicles coming in. So then we can overlay the hard brakings, and you can see exactly of those boundary conditions that there's hard braking events are happening. So and then we can bring in the camera images too. So we have three colors: blue, gray, and orange. So, and these corresponds to the cameras at mile marker 55, 57, and 58. And what I'm going to do is like move in time now. So I'm going to keep moving, and you can see like, look for the slider that's going to move in time, and we can see the camera images changing. So when I get close to over here, when we have these conditions, kind of slowdown conditions happening, you see these queues starting to build up over here in this orange, and then you have the final queues. That's exactly here. So, and then when we go further, you see the queue still there, and the queue is slightly dissipating, and then we go up here. When we get to the gray part, you see the queues actually coming over here. So this is a nice ground truth or validation of actually what we are seeing in the data and what we are seeing in the ground. And what the data collects or captures is actually what we are seeing in the ground too. So what I'm going to do now is going to go a bit more into the trajectory data and just show like some of the performance metrics and the analytics that we can do from the trajectory data. So as I mentioned earlier, this was a crash incident that resulted in a secondary crash, and unfortunately to the close of the interstate as well. So we have trajectory data here, and this is our event that occurred. That's between 3 and 6 p.m. So let's zoom in and look at those trajectories for this period. And there's your primary crash that happened, and then you can see the stopping speeds kind of going down. And then you can see your secondary crash, and if you overlay the hard braking, you see the hard brakings exactly at those boundary conditions between your congested and uncongested regime. And this is when you're going from that free flow conditions to a completely congested period, and then where you have to slam the brakes to make sure you don't go and have a crash out there. So then some of the neat metrics that we can do is look at this closure. So the interstate was closed for nearly 30 minutes. The traffic impact nearly lasted for 2.5 hours when you have first had the street slowdowns, and then when you're getting back to normal conditions. And then we can look at the queue length too. Like it was a pretty significant event that resulted in like a 12-mile queue. And then we have some interesting trajectories here. Some of them that seems to go over the other trajectories. So what's happening here is that if we overlay the exits, these are actually the diversions. These are the guys who were lucky enough to get to the back of the queue and they were close to an exit and take the exit and get back on the interstate. And this way they were able to cover this area within 25 minutes, whereas the poor guy who was stuck in the queue had to wait for more than an hour to get back and keep going. So those are some of and we have some interesting nuggets too. You see it over here. There is a key off event happening here. All of a sudden this trajectory stops happening, and what's happening is that there's a key off, and then they resume back on the interstate. So key offs are not, it's when you see key offs on interstate, that means you have a pretty bad event that's going on. So all these are like these red flags telling us, hey, there's a significant event happening and you need to look into this. And some of the other cool things that we found out where you see these two trajectories going against the flow of traffic. When we took a deeper dive, we found out that these are U-turns that were happening on the interstate. And again, coming back and doing the U-turn. And again, just wanted to highlight some of the things that we're able to look at that we were never able to see before. And so if you want to read more about this or know more about this, we published an article on this in ITE Journal. So I'll paste these links in the chat window later. Okay, so we talked about all the fusion of traffic speeds and the trajectory, and we also want to talk about how scalable this data is. So I'm going to go to Texas now, and I'm going to look at I-35, 500-mile interstate running north-south. And what we're going to look at is the heartbreaking events every day by the mile marker. So from 0 to 500, from 0 to 500. And then you can see like every single day, you can see the heartbreaking events happening. So we've highlighted some of the major areas, like the cities where you see most of heartbreakings, but what you see is like some of over here, something kind of popping up over here, there. So that's not kind of normal on the interstate. So let's go and look. So that's the area of the city of Waco where we see some of those peaks kind of happening. And when we took a deeper dive, what we found was there was a lot of construction happening that was resulting in these heartbreaking events. So again, just showing how scalable this data is and the power of this to identify some of those hotspots and crashes and those near misses that we can avoid later. So I want to close out by looking forward and saying and talk about the heartbreaking events. Now, previously, we had to wait for crash data. Like when there was not enough crash data to usually do like statistical analysis, we had to combine like maybe years of crash data to find out like what's actually going on. But these heartbreakings, if you look at it, those are near misses or surrogates of heartbreak or surrogates of these crashes. So systematically tabulating these heartbreaking events provides us an opportunity to proactively identify issues. And what we did is like we looked at a study where we looked at heartbreaking events and crashes over 5 years and heartbreaking events for a month at intersections. And specifically what we found is that there's a strong correlation between heartbreaking events and rear-end crashes. And we've detailed more on this in the Journal of Big Data Analytics. I'll also paste this link if you're interested in that. So that's all I have to hope for today. I hope this was very interesting, and then I'll give it back to Joe to open the floor for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Matthew. That's a fantastic presentation. I want to first of all ask, are there any questions from our virtual YouTube before I open the floor? Okay. I would like those who have questions to make it to one of the two floor microphones, and we'll go ahead and address any questions that the audience has. Okay.
Morning, Doctor. What are the sources of the data for the hard braking, and is that publicly available? Was it a proprietary thing you had to get from somewhere? It seems really useful.
Absolutely. So this data is coming from the OEM. So we are partnering with a company called Wejo. So they're collecting this data directly from the OEMs, and that's the source of hard braking data. It's actually from the OEMs. They set up a threshold of 2.68 meter per second square. I think that's close, approximately around 0.26 Ts. So whenever this vehicle exceeds the threshold of this braking, it is considered as an event, and then goes back to the vendor and the dispatch bus.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from the floor? I'll ask one. Do you have other states besides Texas that have reached out to you and your department for more research, such as what you did around Waco and parts of Texas?
So this study is part of the Pool Funds program. I think there's around 11 states that's participating in there, and I think we have most of them in here. So it's mostly Indiana that what we are doing it, but we have a combination of like all these states that we have data for, and we are working collectively with them.
Okay. Other questions from the floor?
And also, just to mention, what I've shown today, or what we have mainly discussed, is that mobility side on the interstates, and we also look at it as signal performance measures too, with this data. So there's a lot of things that we can actually do with this, a huge potential opportunity with this data.
Okay. Dr. Matthew, I appreciate you participating in our summer seminar today. It's kind of been a new thing doing this hybrid, virtual, and in person, so it's been a success. Thank you for being a part.
Thank you.
Read a bio if you'd like.
Thank you. All right, our second speaker today, in person, we have Greg Ramsey. He's Director of Public Works and Engineering at Peachtree Corners, Georgia. And I want to say something for a moment. I used to be at Sandy Springs, and I was on the Smart Cities Committee there. And I would tell the committee, look at what they're doing in Peachtree Corners. That's what I want to see us doing in Sandy Springs. So I've kind of been following what's going on in your city for a while. I rode the Ollie. I got left work early one day and rode the autonomous shuttle. Greg is responsible for managing municipal operations and maintenance of the city's infrastructure. He oversees the engineering, land development, stormwater, regulatory compliance, municipal solid waste, right-of-way maintenance, traffic, and transportation. He's a graduate of Georgia Tech, a licensed PE, and has over 24 years experience in municipal engineering and public works. And present Greg Ramsey.
First of all, I used to work at Sandy Springs. To hear that you're jealous of us is fantastic. There's a lot of retribution there. Thanks for letting me come share today. Thanks for coming in today after last night's festivities. First got to share about this project 2 years ago. It was under construction with impossible deadlines, and I was extremely stressed. But fortunately, we made those deadlines. We had this project built in a ridiculous amount of time. The Lieutenant Governor and all the dignitaries showed up with a ribbon cutting, and we were done, thankfully. At least mostly done from what they could see. Again, this is Curiosity Lab. This is a Peachtree Corners project that started out as an economic development project. Didn't really have any use case, didn't really have any need. We just needed to build a niche. And our city started out as a technology hub back in the 70s. And we wanted to give that city a rebirth with technology that's current today instead of the technology of the 70s, which, much like me, is showing a lot of age. So happy to share a couple of updates today about our project. Just a quick reminder, I did have somebody Monday morning say, is Peachtree Corners a real city? So I did say yes, and one day I'll be a real boy. Like I said, this is an economic development project. We have a lot of marketing, kitschy things attached to it, including that hashtag you see there, Silicon Orchard, trying to tag off of Silicon Valley. I voted for Silicon Forest. but Orchard won out. We are a Tree City, USA, so I guess that's connected somehow. But hashtag Silicon Orchard City, small city, big technology. Located just outside of 285, southwest Gwinnett County, largest city in Gwinnett County. So here's a couple of the strongest elements of our project. We have the autonomous shuttle test track, which Joe got to ride. Our mobility test platform, which is a vehicle, and then the city street of the future that we built, and then our innovation center. Talk a little bit about some of those in detail. We have a live 5G environment throughout the entire corridor. Tech Park is a 500-acre technology park. Like I said, built in the 70s for the most part, some in the early 80s. And that 5G is throughout that entire corridor. So actually we have tenants along the route that have 5G if they need it. If they have 5G cell phones, that availability is there for them. We, the city, own all the infrastructure. So there's no other government red tape besides that which we create, which is minimized to the maximum extent possible. We have no charge for use of the infrastructure. The lab itself is free. There is an onboarding process, just some paperwork for all the attorneys to get paid for. And then there's no IP rights that are required to be kept by the city. That's important for a lot of testing technology. They want their intellectual property to be maintained by themselves and not have to be shared with us or anybody else. We are NIST compliant. Reading NIST language is fascinating if you're ever having trouble sleeping. We also have general liability. We cover the entire corridor. We have a Lloyd's of London account, which is super cool. But getting through even something as simple as ensuring this project was very complicated in the beginning. And while we're a technology innovation center, even insurance and innovation had to occur in the beginning. Like I said, the economic development arm of this spent a lot of money on a cool video. So I am at least fiscally responsible for showing some of this video.
Qualcomm and Peachtree Corners have joined together to deploy CV2X technology at the Curiosity Lab in Peachtree Corners, Georgia. CV2X, or Cellular Vehicle to Everything, is the platform for vehicles to communicate with each other, as well as everything and everyone around them. A 360-degree non-line-of-sight situational awareness is provided via two modes, direct and network. Direct mode includes vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure, and vehicle to pedestrian. The direct mode uses a dedicated Intelligent Transportation System Signal, or ITS, where rich sensor data is shared with other CV2X vehicles based on their proximity to each other. The network mode is a vehicle-to-network system providing non-CV2X information in the environment like traffic guidance and avoidance, weather, and emergency notifications via traditional networks utilizing mobile 5G. It can also link in data from cameras, smart sensors, and any manner of relevant data that can be aggregated to provide meaningful resolution. Intelligent transportation systems are rapidly evolving as robust 5G networks, artificial intelligence, and forward-thinking companies like Qualcomm and Jacobs coalesce around great ideas to bring about better, smarter, and safer transportation solutions. The future of automotive intelligence is accelerating at the Curiosity Lab.
All right, as you can see, we've come a long way in 2 years from just a road construction project to something that's live and active and ever-changing. The infrastructure change is part of the T-Mobile network, the Qualcomm agreement that we've had. We actually went to San Diego, met with Qualcomm, fantastic people. The recent partnership with them allowed us to boost the 5G signal through their equipment that they've installed. These are some of the partners, like I said, T-Mobile, Qualcomm did the boosting, Cisco provides the Wi-Fi, and then Hargray, headquartered down in this area, a lot of the cable companies of the Atlanta area, nobody knows about Hargray. Hargray's huge down here on the coast, and so Hargray put in the fiber for us. It's a great partnership with those four organizations. Here's a little bit more about the details. You can see this is the intersection. This is the only traffic signal that I'm responsible for, so please don't break it. I don't want to own anymore. We have the autonomous vehicle lane on the outside. You see those blue chevrons. There was no MUTCD marking for an autonomous vehicle lane, so we created that just to signify the lane, just to designate the lane is not for regular vehicular traffic. You see we've got some markings through the intersection for that lane as well, just enhanced marking to try to raise the visibility of that lane. Got the separation, the flexible lane separators. I can tell you that the bus drivers hate those. I'm not very good at driving straight. And a new signal that we've put in, like I said, and it's got some technology associated with that's ever evolving as well. This is also directly adjacent to the left there is the driveway for our Network Innovation Center. That name keeps changing too. Used to be NOC, used to be Curiosity Lab, now it's the Innovation Center. And so this is our signal where we do a lot of the testing, a lot of the camera operation. There's a picture of the inside of the guts of the Innovation Center and our cool cabinet wrap that we've got as well. We recently added a test vehicle. I pushed very hard for us to get a DeLorean. I pushed. But DeLoreans only come with 2 seats, and we can't show our project off very well with 2 seats, however cool that may have been. This is a live vehicle. You saw it in the video. We got a rack on top. It looks like a luggage rack, but all kind of technology connected up there. GPS antennas. There's long-range LiDAR. There's short-range LiDAR. Short-range equipment on the front. Inside, lots of beeping, lots of noises, lots of video up on the dash. Very distracting driving if you're not prepared for it. But we've used this as our show and tell vehicle. We also have a golf cart if the weather is really nice, but this vehicle is connected to a lot of that technology and the infrastructure that we put in, so people can see the action as they ride down the road. So pretty cool opportunity with this vehicle. I would love, now that I heard yesterday IT is going back live, we'd love to host a future IT lunch. This is our Innovation Center at the bottom level. We have an awesome space down there. Lots of cool artwork, if nothing else. But this is our technology center. We have some of our corporate partners are working out of there. T-Mobile has a regular office. UPS is a recent addition. I'll talk about that in a minute. But lots of different small scale up to large scale innovations that are underway and being tested in the lab and based out of the center that we have. That's Old City Hall, by the way. Didn't look like that when I worked there. This is the Ollie that Joe got to ride from back in late 2019 into early 2020. And then we had a partnership for a long time with Tortoise and GoX. This was a remotely operated, teleoperated scooter. It was like a scooter Uber, or an Uber scooter. You have to say that slowly. Plug into the app, call your scooter. It was driven to you by a guy in Mexico City. You use it as you see fit, drop it off when you're done, and the guy in Mexico City drove it back to the shop to have it charged up. So that was a pretty awesome thing. Unfortunately, we launched that right before March of 2020, and then everybody stopped going to work for some reason. So put that on a little bit of a hiatus, but those scooters are still in my shop. We go play with them every now and then. My kids love it. Another thing we worked on for a long time was drone delivery. We still have some of that operation tightly under wraps, but they're testing some last mile delivery options, even food delivery for lunch. Some of those possibilities I think are super cool. And I think we're going to see that happen sooner rather than later. So just some more details on our infrastructure. We've got the lab itself is the lanes. We have control room in the network operations center. You see some of the equipment up on the towers. The Cisco citywide connectivity is there. Just a wide spectrum of technology. Also got some specific details. You see that on the left. We had a partnership with the Ray down on I-85 coming in from Alabama. We put in a Wattway solar roadway right in front of City Hall. That's been a really cool thing to test, to check out. Checking for durability, checking for use. Those solar panels are connected to the electric vehicle charging stations that are in the front of City Hall. So an autonomous vehicle rolling through there on the lane, then the lane itself is generating the power that can power that car. A lot of good continuity in that idea. We do have the largest EV charging hub in the Metro Atlanta region. Hopefully you can see that. Electrify America, Tesla, and then ChargePoint are the partners there. And on the right, you see the video as a sensor equipment that was provided by Bosch. Cybersecurity is a big topic of what we do. We actually hosted the Secret Service, which is really cool to put on my calendar, to come check out how this is going to work in the future. We have partnerships with Cyber 2.0 and then Cynamics. Those are organizations out of Israel. Our city manager has gone to Israel on a number of occasions to partner with their Chamber of Commerce. What a fantastic opportunity that's been. But Cyber 2.0 is a boundary infrastructure for security, and Cynamics provides the security at the individual devices. So lots of cool technology there that's being tested. We're going all the way from insurance now to cybersecurity. The next thing, thankfully, things are returning a little bit to normal. People have come back to work. We've got some people showing up at our restaurants. We just entered into a partnership with Beep. Beep is a mobility service provider, and then Beep is providing, through our agreement, 4 shuttles. 2 of the Ollies that you see there in the front, that's Ollie 2.0. So come ride 2.0, please. It's much better than 1.0. Still looks like a toaster. And then Navia in the back is a French vehicle. We have 2 of those. So two Ollies and 2 Navias, are going to go live August 2nd. So just a week and a half. Love to host you guys. Come out and take a ride. If nothing else, just come get your picture made before this becomes a reality in a few years, and you can remember when it was just under testing. So this is right outside of my office. I see these guys playing with these every day. It's just super cool to see stuff like this happening in the real world. The next thing, I mentioned UPS. They have a corner of our innovation center. We actually had to frost out the window. They're doing such secret, super cool stuff. It's cool having UPS and all of their investment in R&D partnering with us. We have upcoming agreements with IATL and SOIL. That's a company that's looking at cyber availability across rural areas. There's always the talk about 5G is cool, but 5G is not available in the middle of Southwest Georgia. So that's a company that's looking at that and testing some of the stability of their networks. And the next thing for you all, this I think was a press release that came out on Friday. V2X Live is going to be in Peachtree Corners in October. The Hilton Atlanta, just outside of our office, is going to host this cool technology event. I highly encourage you to come. It's going to be amazing to see the technology. We're going to connect our shuttle, our AV lane, to the parking lot of the Hilton and have those Ollies and Navias loop around and give people a ride from the Hilton just through our lab. So super cool opportunity. I don't know how much it costs. I get no I get no benefit from your attendance, but I think you would get a lot out of it. And that's it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Greg. I'm sure we have some questions from our audience, and we may have some from our virtual as well, and they'll let us know that if we have any. Who would like to come to one of the microphones and ask a question for Greg? Okay.
What level of participation are you anticipating going forward? I know it was COVID last year and it was very limited, but in terms of private sector utilizing the lab and your infrastructure that you actually placed to, what kind of, have you gauged any kind of interest in people wanting to come and use the facility and the infrastructure?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We have seen a tremendous return of people just showing up to work, which helps. We need people just riding it. The testing is great, but without actual regular people like us to go ride it, it doesn't help them very much. But we've seen a return to the office for the most part that I think is going to sustain it. We're also connecting a hotel to the north end. There's a brand new brewery that just opened, Anderby Brewing, on the north end of our lab. Connects the Marriott and the Hampton, and there's one more hotel down there. Connecting hotels that are hosting conference attendees and business travelers. Those hotels stay very, very full. I think it's 95% full on a regular basis, and connecting them to that brewery has helped them. It's helped the brewery. The brewery has food trucks that show up on a nightly basis. Very cool place to hang out. And so now we've got hotel guests who don't have to Uber a mile and a half or walk a mile and a half, stagger back a mile and a half. They're riding the autonomous shuttle back and forth, and I think that's a cool use case opportunity. And then our hope is that we're going to expand that our lab is just a mile and a half one way, so 3 mile loop. Our hope is to eventually stretch that north to the city's town center, which is across from the Forum on 141. Is Andrew Heath in here? Andrew Heath, and I had a meeting with him in Hibbard a few weeks ago. It was a very positive meeting, but we hit the world's best traffic hurdle, which is the attorney department. And the attorneys have slowed that down a little bit. But we were looking at using the shared shoulder. There's a multi-use path up there. Not sure what they don't actually call it that, but there's some wide pavement on the shoulder. We'd love to use that and make it a circuit instead of just out and back. And if we can connect our hotels, our innovation center to the town center, then we've got a use case for ridership that we're excited about. So a lot of opportunities.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Can the general public come see this?
Absolutely. The general
Like
public
my
is
kids
highly
over
encouraged to
there,
come
so-
ride. They can come ride that August 2nd. Come take a ride, please. There's different stops along the way. There's a stop right in front of City Hall, so you can park for free. Charge your EV right in front of City Hall. Go ride an autonomous shuttle. There's a steward on board from Beep who gives you a tour of the shuttle, a tour of what they're doing, and you can ride it back and forth as much as you like. But again, highly encouraging the public to ride. Back in 2019 and early 2020, you'd see families with kids coming. They're taking their picture, taking selfies out there. I mean, this is the technology that's going to be probably a commonplace thing for our kids that are 10 or 12 years old. And here they are, got a picture. Hey, when I was 10, I got to stand in front of this with mom and dad, and now it's the thing that I take to school, in 40 or 50 years from now. So encourage everybody to come take a ride. That part's free. If ITE were to come and let us host you all at a future lunch in the Innovation Center, be happy to show off all that stuff. I mean, that tour is awesome to show off. It's pretty cool being an engineer and get to do this economic development stuff and marketing stuff. Lots of exciting stuff that normally people don't like to talk to engineers about.
Do we have any other questions today? Well, thank you very much, Greg. Transition here. Okay, our third speaker today is Steve Bowles, And he has over 20 years experience in the industry knowledge in communication and networking. He's a IoT specialist. He's probably going to tell us what IoT is, Internet of Things. It's something I've been following for a while. It's an interest of mine. He's been involved with a lot of different manufacturers and that provide networking connectivity, security, and video and ITS solutions. So he's with 360 Network Solutions, and he has combined these resources to provide solutions that are best matched for particular applications. At 360 Network Solutions, he's been responsible for several rollouts of network and security solutions for different state and local agencies. He's a graduate of University of North Georgia. He used to be called North Georgia College, with a BBA and minor in chemistry. His career path has been the technology field from environmental to networking, computing, and security. I'll present Steve Bowles.
Slide. Yeah, that'll do it. I think it'll stick. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. All right. Everybody's had a good time while they've been here at the beach? Ready to go home? No. My wife is like, are we staying the rest of the week? I said, no, I don't think so. It's time to go. The weather's been beautiful. The activities have been wonderful. And everybody around here, I mean, it's just a good time. A little bit of rain, but, you know, the sun still pops out. What I'm going to talk about is securing transportation infrastructure and networks. And it's going to be, I've got to read my notes because I went through this last night and I'm like going, there's a lot of good information and it takes me right at about 15 minutes. So there's, you know, I'm going to give you 15 minutes, which really would normally take 3 to 6 hours. Everybody familiar with Ed Falk? Everybody know Ed Falk? 2 years ago, he was at ITS Georgia at, I think it was Sandy Springs. And he does this for Federal Highway. Him and another guy, Ray Murray, and they do it at all the ITS around the country. But theirs is it's a 2-day session. It's 3 hours a day, and they go through cybersecurity, physical security, but you know, specific to transportation. It's a good message. It's kind of an interesting message because it's a message that I think needs to be gotten with regards to transportation. In today's environment with cyber crimes on the rise and costing millions of dollars in time and ransom monies, now more than ever it's time to audit and review how we address cybersecurity and include physical security of our ITS infrastructure, Colonial Pipeline, you know, financial institutions, the power grid. Everybody looks at the power grid as being the, you know, critical infrastructure. Critical infrastructure, there's 16 sectors, and transportation falls under one of those 16 sectors. When Biden went to Russia and had a sit-down tea with Putin, he said, you cannot attack these 16 sectors. And it was basically the 16 sectors that are defined through NIST. The majority of the critical infrastructure, you know, rides on transportation. So if you look at it, you know, everything is riding on our roads. Fuel, food, people. Power grid goes down, the lights go out. But if the infrastructure, our transportation infrastructure goes down, then people don't get to places. Fuel doesn't get delivered, food doesn't get delivered, and things like that. Atlanta traffic could be worse, right? Alan, I took this from you. 2018, Alan was quoted, but I mean, think about this. Can this happen in Atlanta? Can it happen in DC? Well, if you remember, DC, before the 2017 inauguration, a lot of cameras got hacked, and the Secret Service were up in arms. So think about if somebody took over the cameras in Atlanta and there were no feeds. Or think about if there was a concerted effort to go to 5 intersections and just open those intersections downtown, turn off the power, all at the same time, at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. You know, what if it were 5 or 10? and all of a sudden those intersections were in flash. What would traffic look like? Make that 10 intersection, make it 20 intersections. Just shutting the power off, what would it look like? So there are many agencies that are providing support and guidance to help shore up and enhance our cybersecurity initiatives. Agencies like NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, Department of Homeland Security, CISA, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, NEMA, and InfraGard. InfraGard is an interesting organization, and there is a local InfraGard in Atlanta. Has anybody heard about InfraGard? Nobody. InfraGard is sponsored by the FBI, and it is all it's all IT professionals, but they're talking about cybersecurity, ransomware, and other things like that. And there are not many people of our profession in transportation that are in this organization, which I think there should be a part of transportation in this InfraGard organization. It is sponsored and it is run by the FBI, but it is a private organization. To become a member, I had to be, I'm a member, you have to get a background, they do a background investigation, and they went back to my college days. And that wasn't a pretty sight though. But anyway, it's a good organization. They share a lot of good information though. So, and a lot of these other organizations, ISC CERT, the NEMA and InfraGard, there's a lot of information and a lot of people that are out there that are helping us in developing standards and guidance and best practices. So the landscape is changing. Traffic is indeed on the rise. More vehicles, more people, more distractions. Phones, self-driving vehicles, driver-assisted vehicles, message signs, alerts, accidents, emergency vehicles, and lots of construction. So the challenges, there are many challenges facing us today with everything connected in our homes, offices, and on the streets. Connected vehicles, connected intersections, our networks are more exposed, and the potential of hacking is greater than ever. We've moved away from the old days, the old school serial communications, to now everything is going Ethernet. Ethernet, cellular, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi connectivity. We say IoT, Internet of Things, but it's really IoE, the Internet of Everything. I mean, everything is getting connected. This is just a little blurb that I pulled out of from Federal Highway, and just some of the things. It's a small list that might apply to some of your circumstances, but I'm sure there's a lot more that could be added to it. Where we're lacking in operations. Number 1, port security certificates. Number 2, whitelisting. 3, we need more training. 4, patch management and of software. 5, multi-factor authentication. We're seeing more and more multi-factor. Everybody, I think, is probably doing more multi-factor authentication now also. I do it with all my online banking, and a lot of times with email and things like that. Number 6, training and simulation of events. And number 7, increased IT support and IT staffing in the TMC. Over the years that I've been doing this, I remember the days going in and talking to traffic engineering departments, and it was just traffic engineering people, and that was it. There were no IT people in there, because there was always IT on one side of the table and the traffic guys on the other side of the table. And the IT guys are sitting back there saying, "You're not getting on my network." And the traffic guys wanted to get on the network, and they were seeing this move to Ethernet. What I see now is more IT getting involved in the TMC, working better with traffic engineering. I think one of the, Gwinnett had a good instance where one of their traffic guys got certified as a network engineer, and then was IT support for the traffic group. And so he unfortunately left and went to the healthcare industry. But more IT support for sure. The NIST Framework. Tom out there laughing?
Yeah.
Do you miss him?
Oh, yeah.
The NIST Framework. The framework integrates industry standards and best practices to help organizations manage their cybersecurity risk It provides a common language that allows staff at all levels within the organization and at all points in the supply chain development a shared understanding of their cybersecurity risk. Identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And we'll talk a little bit more about these. Identify. What processes and assets need protection? What are the risks and how to manage risks that are internal and external? What are the threat vectors and what assets have potential exposure? Asset management. So we're talking about data, personnel, devices, systems, and facilities. Business environment, we're talking about organizations, missions, objectives, stakeholders, and activities. The governance, more so of the policies and the procedures. And then risk assessment, the organization understands the cybersecurity risk. Risk management strategy, the priorities and constraints of these risk and risk tolerances. And then supply chain risk management, understanding what your supply chain risk looks like also. Am I really secure? Well, are you? So, a typical traffic intersection might look something like this, where you've got a network device and a controller and a camera placed in there. It used to be acceptable to leave roadside hardware open to access, but the climate of the threat has changed, partly because moves to analog to digital communication potentially have created access to whole networks. So moving to Ethernet has been a great thing, but it's given us greater and higher level of exposure and more threat vectors to get into either our network, enterprise network, or even the ITS network. So protect. Access, what safeguards are available? Access control and cabinet access, physical security, data security, server-based centralized password management, and multi-factor authentication. So access control, actually securing the physical assets, awareness and training. The organizations, all the personnel and partners are trained and are apt at what the cybersecurity rules and regs are. Data security, information and records are managed consistent with the organization's risk strategy. Information protection processes and procedures, mostly all of your policies. Maintenance, maintaining and repairing everything, keeping everything running. Protection technology, just that you have the right products and the right devices and technologies out there that are doing what they're supposed to do. Some of you remember back before the Super Bowl. This is a good use case for physical security. So DHS came into Atlanta, city of Atlanta, said, hey, you got all these traffic cabinets around the 1.5 mile area of Mercedes-Benz. They need to be secured. And to toot our horn, 360, we rolled in and we were able to secure these using technology to secure the physical traffic cabinet with intelligent locks, smart locks, online lock systems. I think it ended up to be about 100, 120, 140 cabinets around Mercedes-Benz and COP, and they're still being used today. So it's growing, or ITS is growing. So if you look at when I look at a traffic cabinet, I look, 20 years ago, what was in a traffic cabinet? And then today, what's in a traffic cabinet? 20 years ago, you had if you had fiber, you had a switch, and then you had a traffic controller and conflict monitor, and maybe that was it. Maybe UPS or something like that was on the network, and that was pretty much it. Camera. But now we're doing a lot of more analytics at the edge. Now you're talking connected vehicle. So, when you've got connected vehicle, you got RSUs that are in cabinets now also. There's, the value of that equipment from 20 years ago goes from 20,000 now to 50 to 70,000. The criticality of that equipment in that cabinet is even increased now more so than ever, as far as because of the connected vehicle and the roadside units. So physical access control, y'all remember these, right? Old school number two, what I consider old school number two key. Number two key is old school. It's a $5 key that we are protecting, an aluminum box with $50,000 worth of gear inside of it. That key, I can also buy it for $5 or $10 off of eBay. There are other options. There's intelligent keys and locks, and then there's extremely smart intelligent lock systems that basically become a part of the network and allow to be able to secure the infrastructure, the hardware, to secure that aluminum box. Detect. So what techniques can we identify incidents, anomalies, and events? Activities that are detected in a timely manner. Security, continuous monitoring. The information system and assets are monitored. Detection processes. Detection process procedures are maintained and tested. Respond. What techniques can contain impacts of incidences? Response planning. Response processes and procedures they're known and they're executed. Communications. Responding activities and coordinated with internal and external entities. Analysis, analyzing what's happened. Mitigation activities are performed to prevent expansion of the event, and then improvements, we basically learn from our lessons, right? Recovering or recover. What techniques can we restore capabilities? So recovery planning, what's the process and procedures that are executed to maintain and ensure timely restoration? So it's big to enable us to get back up and running again after an incident. Improvements, recovery planning, again, learning from lessons. And the unfortunate thing about this is that a lot of times we learn from lessons, and sometimes they're hard lessons. Communications, restoration activities are coordinated with internal and external parties, making sure that coordination is there when you're recovering, whether it be with local, state, federal agencies. So what does this have to do with my network? Well, it has everything to do with your network. The principle of defense is to assume compromise and take countermeasures. So, best defense is an offense, so it's time to take action, time and I think a lot of entities, a lot of agencies that we've seen across the country are taking critical infrastructure transportation a lot more seriously now, as far as dual factor authentication, doing security, more security in the cabinet itself on layer 2 devices. In the old days, it used to be that the ITS network was a flat layer 2 network, and where it all came back into the TMC, all the protection, all the firewalls were put there. A company that I used to work for, we made an industrial firewall. And everybody's familiar with, the Harry Potter ride at Disney or in Florida. So the Harry Potter ride uses Allen Bradley automation controllers. It uses 160 controllers on that ride. And on every controller, we stuck this security appliance on that device. So there was 160 controllers and then 160 security appliances, because what they did is they this device protected malware, commands. It was an interesting device, and they spent a lot of money to protect that, because there was a lot of liability in there for them also. So that's an example of control systems. But if you look at an example for us in the ITS industry, it's we're putting people's lives at hands as far as traffic lights, intersections, connected vehicles, data that's available, because now we're collecting data from a lot of these vehicles that are going through our intersections. So assume that something is going to happen, and identify and respond, containment, and stop further actions and prevention. And then learn. And this is always a learning experience, because this is new ground. This is absolutely new ground, I think, as far as securing the data. We're getting more and more data, day in and day out. More and more data is being generated, so we have to protect that. But again, not only the cyber, but the physical part of it also. Just for fun, if you want to go out there, you can go. There's a couple of websites that will show you who's getting attacked as far as cyber attacks. Go home when you go home this week, and if you can log into your router at home, and you can see your router's probably being hit multiple times, hundreds of times a day by people trying to get into your router, your home router. But this map gives you an idea. The United States is number 4 as far as being cyber attacks. Russia is actually number 1. Brazil is number 2, and China is number 3. I don't get those stats though. Anyway, so what's next for 2021? Hopefully, awareness and planning. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen. We've seen examples, Colonial Pipeline. The power grid is they're always getting smacked one way or another. God forbid that we see it in our industry, but the exposure is there. And the only thing that my suggestion would be is to look at that and to limit your exposure. So that's all I have, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Steve. I want to open the floor to any questions you might have.
Steve, I'm hosting a young man next week who's interested in the IT world. But one of the questions I'm sure he's going to ask me is, and he's a high school student, what kind of academic path should he pursue in college if this is the industry that he would like to be a professional?
Computer science, definitely. Computer science.
Okay.
Now it works.
Now, other questions?
Everybody's good to go.
I think what you've seen today is how these 3 talks all kind of come together. Data, security, being able to apply it to our profession. It's been a great opportunity to host this session. I appreciate all 3 of our speakers and all those who attended and asked questions, and also those who are virtual. I want to give everybody another round of applause. Over on the table, you have the PDH form to get credit for your professional registrations. And unless there's something else from one of our other leaders, that's it for this session. Thank you.